Okay, so it's been quite a year of change, hasn't it? And I don't know about you guys, but it certainly seems to me like the changes that are happening faster, and they're more dramatic than ever before. Just look at some of the ones on the screen here. And what's interesting to me is the role that social media is playing in a lot of this. Not only in the, facilitating the conversations that ensue around some of these events, but in some cases even driving the events themselves. I mean, think about the Egyptian Revolution, think about Occupy Wall Street. Those events arguably never would have happened without social media. And certainly that's true in global events, but it's also true in our space as well. Just think of the recent buzz about the Facebook IPO. Think about the rise of Pinterest and Instagram. And Instagram is getting bought by Facebook for $1 billion. And I think it's fair to say that they're still trying to figure out what their business model is. And of course, the recent buzz of late about the sale of AT&T's directory operations to Cerberus. So, whether you work at Yellow Book or Facebook, I think you have to remember the important role that we play in this role of instantaneous information and instantaneous conversation. Because in many ways, we're the backbone of it, right? We're the ones that are providing the business information that consumers are using to do business with local businesses day in and day out across the country, 365 days a year. A year ago in Las Vegas, we rebranded the association to Local Search Association. And so this morning, what I'd like to do for my few minutes is just tell you where we are in that process. And in particular, I'd like to frame my remarks around three themes. The first is, most of you all are members of the association and pay us money in some regard, and you deserve to know what we focused on and what we actually got done for you that produced some value for you. So that's number one. Secondly, what's the current state of your association? And then thirdly, and perhaps most interestingly, where are we headed? And how do we think we can serve you effectively amidst all this change that's going on? So let's wind the clock back just a little bit. We're in Las Vegas last year at Caesars Palace. We had just come off Seattle opt-out ordinance being passed. There was an ordinance that was being considered in San Francisco that was opt-in that was on the verge of passing. And we were very much an industry at risk. And we were very much an industry that was at the risk of some of this legislation avalanching. And so our board, quite rightfully, established public policy and reputation management as our number one priorities. And so here's the legislative landscape that we've faced in the last year. 14 markets, 6 at the state level, you can see them here, and 8 at the city or municipal level. And I think it's fair to say that the trend that we're seeing more than anything at this point is more and more legislative activity at the local level. And that's of concern to us because, as you all know, local legislation moves along a lot faster. It's harder to keep track of than state legislation does. And so at the risk of cutting to the chase quickly with you this morning, I'm very proud to tell you that in the last year since San Francisco, no new legislation has passed. And that's an accomplishment that I feel tremendously proud of, and it's one that you all should feel very, very proud of as well. And I can tell you that we haven't had the success because we're lucky. We've had the success because we've been really smart about what we've been doing in our messaging. So what's been the cornerstone of our success? What have we done that's worked so well? The cornerstone of our success, in my opinion, has been we have absolutely pounded the concept of consumer choice. We don't want to deliver phone books to people who don't want them. We say it in a number of different ways. Basically, that's the message. And the cornerstone of that message is our opt-out site, yellowpagesopt-out.com, that was launched last February. It's a great site. You can see it here. Peter had a screenshot of it as well. It's got a great design. It's easy to use. And most importantly, it works. People go into the site. They put in their zip code. They get a list of all the books. They can opt out of whatever they want. That information goes to publishers. That goes into their delivery records, and then consumers don't get books anymore. So we've got a great system that works. Interestingly, for me anyways, getting this thing off the ground so fast and so effective required the cooperation of some 170 publishers, and that's got to be some sort of world record in the association world, getting something done so well, so fast with so many people. But that's anyway, my take on things. Just a little bit of color around the site. There's been about 2.8 million directories that have been opted out of. Peter alluded to that. It's a very small percentage in the greater scheme of things, about 0.5% roughly. About a third of the traffic that comes into the site is coming directly into the opt-out site. So that tells me that we're starting to do a pretty darn good job of getting the awareness up around the opt-out URL. More of the larger publishers are putting the URL on the cover of their books now, so that's really helping generate awareness of the site. And we would very much welcome other publishers, smaller publishers, to get that URL on the cover of their books as well. Many of you have asked us for guidelines around that, and I believe Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, we sent out some guidelines around the verbiage and the graphic treatment for putting the opt-out information on the cover. So we would very much welcome your participation in that. The other piece of color that's interesting to me here is that most of the people that go into the industry site opt out of all the books. So these are people that just prefer online alternatives, and quite frankly, that's fine with us. You know, I mentioned that we're seeing more and more legislative activity at the local level, and that's true. And 6-8 months ago, I forget when the exact time was, but Amy Healy came to me and said, look, Neg, you know, we're facing these battles all over the place. I can't be in 2 places at one time. We are insufficiently resourced to be able to deal with this issue. And this is really a problem waiting to happen. And so, being the smart guy that I am, I listened to Amy, and we have since increased the staffing in Amy's area to be able to better deal with this. I'll give the thanks to Brad Carson, who freed up some resources in his side of the operation so we could better staff Amy's operation. Perhaps even more importantly, though, we got the board to approve us contracting with a professional Washington, D.C.-based public affairs firm called DTI Group. And these guys are really good. And so now when somebody's considering a piece of legislation in Albany, New York, or Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Cupertino, California, or Long Beach, or wherever it is, chances are DCI has a network of field contacts that they can activate in a phone call. And so we can know right away who introduced the legislation, where is it in the cycle, how serious is the threat, what prompted the bill to be introduced in the first place. And now we can have much more intelligent conversations much earlier in the process than we ever have before. And that's paid huge dividends to us. And when we get these meetings with these elected officials, we've got a great story to tell. We really do. You know, these are reasonable people, and we tell them we've got an opt-out site that works. We're promoting consumer choice. We've got 50% less paper in the market than we did in 2007. The EPA doesn't even track us anymore as a separate category. The delivery guys, I know I met some of the delivery guys here last night, are doing a great job now working with publishers. We were always getting in trouble for delivering books into high rises and not picking them up. And now these guys are doing a great job negotiating requirements with the building managers. They're coming back and they're picking up unused directories after a reasonable period of time. Really doing a super job in better getting those products in and out of the market in a much better way. We're also telling elected officials about the value that our products bring in the marketplace. And they didn't understand that. And now they understand that we're bringing high-quality leads to small businesses, and we're helping them be successful. So we're good guys. And so we've got a great story to tell, and when we get a chance to sit down and have those conversations with these folks, we're having an awful lot of success. And you know what? We're not telling the story by ourselves anymore. We've got a vast array of coalition partners and strategic alliances that are helping us tell our story and bringing a lot more credibility to our messaging. So whenever you see articles and stories about directory distribution, a lot of times it's our coalition partners that are responding to those blog posts or weighing in. And that's really enhanced the credibility of our messaging, as I said. You know, the other thing that's interesting to me about this is we're starting to attend a lot more recycling conferences. And when I say we, it's not just Amy, it's all of us that are going. This is a fairly small community of people. These state recycling coordinators, they know each other. And so the people that we can influence, and there's some influential ones in North Carolina, for example, they get the word out to their counterparts that we're really doing a lot of really good things. And Amy came to me a couple of weeks ago and said, you know, it's an interesting story. The first state where we had legislative activity was 5 years ago in North Carolina. And just a couple of weeks ago, Amy got a chance to present to the recycling conference in North Carolina and South Carolina. And her topic was excellence in sustainability. Right? So we've gone from the problem child in North Carolina and South Carolina to superstars. So really doing a great job. We actually have a new coalition website that's launching today, localpaysoffcoalition.com. It's launching today, and that's really where we can steer elected officials into the site about all the good things that we're doing. So look for that. And we've got a spokesperson now for our coalition, Wellington Webb. Wellington Webb, those of you from the Denver area, was the former mayor of Denver. And he was actually the one responsible for building the Denver airport. Wellington Webb came to our board meeting in February. He's a very impressive man. He signed on to be our industry spokesperson, and he was kind enough to shoot a short video for us this morning that we're going to roll right now.
Hello, my name is Wellington Webb. I proudly served as mayor of Denver for 12 years. And as mayor, I saw many challenges come across my desk. For most businesses, we know that too much regulation makes it more difficult, because the more money you earn, the more employees you can hire, the more money you can make, and the more tax revenue cities receive. Well, unfortunately, everyone has a turn in the barrel, and I'm forced to issue a turn. And one of the reasons that I'm so pleased to work with you and to represent your interests around the country is that I have the ability to tell city leaders throughout this nation that we have a program that works: consumer choice and the ability to opt out. The opt-out program gives consumers the ability to determine if they want directories or if they don't. This is a program that is as American as apple pie, because consumers have a choice. And businesses found a way and a solution to make this program work for cities. So for me, it's easy to tell city leaders and state legislators that we have an association that works, wants to work with local elected officials, and wants to make this city, your communities, a better place to live and a better place to do business. Have a great conference in Florida. I'll see you next time.
So we've done some remarkable work in this area. We really have, led by Amy. But I will tell you that Amy would be the first one to tell you that it's not just her. This really is a team effort, and she's the quarterback of it. But this doesn't work without the cooperation of all of you. We've got many of the people that we've worked very closely with. There are others as well. But I just want to say a huge thanks to the folks on this slide who worked with us in the Public Policy Committee, the Environmental Committee, and the Distribution Committee. These guys have done remarkable work, and they deserve a big round of applause. I mentioned at the top of my remarks that we are in the middle of 2 lawsuits. I thought it would be appropriate just to take a minute or two to update you on the status of where we stand on those. In Seattle, there was an opt-out ordinance that was passed and became law in May of 2011, just about a year ago. It provides for a city-run opt-out program that charges publishers 14 cents per directory for every directory delivered into the city of Seattle, and provides for a mandatory cover language that promotes the city's opt-out site. Shortly after that law was passed, we filed a suit along with Supermedia and Dex One on First Amendment grounds. We also filed for a preliminary injunction, which essentially means we are petitioning the court to not let the law go into effect until the full trial is heard. We were denied that. We have since filed an appeal and have an appeal pending at the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals. There's a 3-judge panel that is hearing our case. There were oral arguments presented heard by that 3-judge panel back in February 9th, I believe it was. And I think it's fair to say that the judges seem to be much more challenging of the City of Seattle's attorneys than they were on us. Now, our lawyer, Bill Champion, will tell you, don't read too much into that. It's hard to predict how these things are going to come out. But I certainly came away from those oral arguments feeling cautiously optimistic that our chances are pretty good. These are federally appointed judges. They're under no particular timeline to rule. We could get a verdict on the Seattle case any day now. It could be weeks or months from now. It's hard to predict. But that's the current status of the Seattle litigation. San Francisco, as you know, is an opt-in ordinance that was scheduled to be effective in May of 2012. It basically bans the distribution of phone books in that market without the prior consent of the consumer. So this is an absolute killer for our industry if this stays into effect. We also filed a preliminary injunction to enjoin that ordinance right away. There is no ruling yet on that filing. The good news, however, is that the City of Seattle has agreed to not enforce the ordinance pending the outcome of the Seattle case. So obviously they were listening to the oral arguments as well in Seattle. And I think our sense is that if we win in Seattle, which is an opt-out bill, there's really no way an opt-in bill is going to hold up. So it seems to us like the judge is sort of waiting for that Seattle verdict to be rendered. In the meantime, the publishers that are operating in the city of San Francisco are operating under a great deal of uncertainty. It's hard to go out and tell a good story with this overhang in the market about what's going on. So we are working very, very hard to get the judge to rule on our preliminary injunction as quickly as possible. In fact, as early as Wednesday, we filed a temporary restraining order on the judge to do just that. So we're working very, very hard to try to bring closure to this quickly. And again, these are federally appointed judges. You can only move them along so far. And they're appointed for life, so it's not like they've got pressure to decide right away. But we think the Seattle verdict, or San Francisco verdict, will be rendered very shortly after we hear some news in Seattle. And so certainly that litigation activity has kept us in the headlines and kept people talking about print media and the future of print media. And certainly our communications efforts have been instrumental in keeping our point of view into that discussion. And it's important to remember that we're promoting the messages in our communications that are important to your businesses. For example, we're talking about how consumers are looking for and shopping for local businesses these days. We're talking about the value that local advertising brings. We talk about a balanced approach and one that requires media integration. And of course, we're talking about our sustainability efforts. And so what exactly does that look like? Well, we've been really, really active on a number of fronts. I talk with reporters all the time. It's really my job to try to influence that coverage in the most positive way as I can for all of you. We're continually pushing out news releases, right? News releases based on the research that we've done, or our sustainability efforts, or just based on general industry news. We have a monthly thought leadership article on search engine land. We've done some 180 blog posts at Local Search Insider. And we're always commenting on stories that appear on the web on your behalf. And then in terms of internal communications, we're trying to push out as much as we can relevant news to keep you all informed of what's going on with all of these activities. And of course, now we're on social media like many of you. We're on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and you can follow, like, and connect with us through those venues. And so that was 2011. So what should we be talking about next? We actually began to give this a great deal of thought, I would say probably 6 months ago. We felt that our messaging with elected officials wasn't resonating really as well as we'd like. And a lot of them in the early going would see us as just contributors to the waste stream. They didn't see us for the true value that we were bringing to local communities. And we got very much inspired by a program that was started by Valley Yellow Pages out in Fresno. And this is a program that really talked about encouraging people to support local businesses. That's what it was all about, encouraging people to support and frequent local businesses. And you heard Mayor Webb say it, right? He talked about the value that, helping the vibrancy of those local shopping communities and how important that is. And what's interesting is that it moves us away from this debate that we're in all the time about paper versus digital and where the leads come from. Because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, right? What matters is that we're delivering leads to local businesses to help them be successful in the market, irrespective of what channel it comes from. And so here's the underpinnings of that message, right? All of you make it easy and free for consumers to get information about local businesses. And by doing that, we're generating economic prosperity, right? We're generating taxes, jobs, and growth. We're encouraging a vibrant and diverse shopping economy. And of course, we're encouraging our sustainability efforts. And that's a message that's really resonating. It's working with legislators. We think it's going to work with small businesses. And we also think it'll work with national advertisers, particularly those with local dealers, distributors, and franchisees. So I'd like to thank the members of the PR committee, led by Stephanie Hobbs, our Vice President of Communications. These guys don't have an easy job these days, right? They're working hard to get the right positive messages out. So I congratulate them, and like under Amy's leadership, the other committees, these guys work very well together. They work well with our Public Policy Committee, and they also work well with our Research Committee. So let's talk a little bit about what our research is telling us. First of all, there is a research workshop tomorrow morning. I'm going to touch on a couple of things that stuck out at me that were sort of interesting, but Natalie Vucinic is running a research workshop tomorrow that will do a much deeper dive on this than I'm going to do this morning. But here's just a couple of slides of some of the data that I thought told an interesting story. So this slide looks at the past monthly reach. This is the Burke local media tracking study. So we switched over to the Burke study in 2009. It's not a Yellow Pages study. This is a local media study, hence the name Local Media Tracking Study. And so what this looks at is the monthly reach by adults of these various media sources, right? And you can see that internet search engines, 66% led the way. So what's interesting to me about this particular slide is you've got, 7 or 8 different media that's listed here. I think 7 of them have a monthly usage of at least 25%. So that shows me that consumers are using a wide variety of media sources pretty regularly on a monthly basis. So if you're a small business person, that's a complicated thing to figure out. And I think that, to me, that explains why they are looking for the help from many of you to help them figure out where their messaging needs to be. The other thing that stuck out at me that was interesting is how big store circulars, emails, promotions, and coupons were. And the reason I say that is because, to me, that's an economically motivated media selection, right? And we've got a fairly sluggish economy right now. You've got a sluggish housing market, you've got high consumer debt, you've got high gas prices, you've got high unemployment still. And so clearly, many people are using those deal-oriented media sites in this day and age. So that tells me that the economy plays a fairly major role in the media selection of consumers. So those are sort of 2 interesting points that stuck out at me on that piece of research. Here's another thing that stuck out at me. This is the intermedia shopping study. And I'm sure Natalie will talk a little bit about this tomorrow. This shows the media that are used by consumers when they're actually buying stuff. Right? So this is the media that are really having an impact on purchases being made by consumers. So the slide that you see here is a consolidation of some 135 different categories of data that we've got. And obviously you're going to get different looks at this if you're looking at the moving category versus the drugstore category or versus the landscaping category. You're going to get different answers here. So this is a composite, right? But what I thought was interesting about this slide is that when you look at online internet, paper Yellow Pages or IYPs, direct mail, coupons, we're selling all this stuff. Or you're selling all this stuff. So we're selling a wide variety of media services that are really effective for consumers to buy things. And that's a very powerful position to be in. We've got a great lineup of products that can help consumers get leads, or businesses get leads from consumers all across the country. So to me, that should be very exciting. I mean, we've got a great lineup of products that actually deliver meaningful results. The other thing that sort of sticks out to me on this particular slide is when you look at the media spend that's for online internet, paper Yellow Pages and IYPs, direct mail, all the things that we're selling, and a few others that even aren't on the list. And the Kelsey guys will probably correct me when I say this. But we're talking about a market size in the neighborhood of $40 to $50 billion. So that's a big number. So we're not playing in a $7 billion Yellow Pages market. We're playing in a $40 to $50 billion local advertising market that Peter said is up for grabs, and he's right. So that should be exciting to us. That's all opportunity. That's all opportunity. And as small businesses have to be confused about all these different media services, they're looking for good advice and counsel on how to figure that out. And that puts us in a good spot. The National Marketing Division, which is a division of the local search association, utilizes this research quite a bit. They also do a lot of call tracking programs. One of the biggest programs that they run is something called the MAP program. It provides for continuous call tracking for the top 400 national advertisers. Not surprisingly, the MAP program produces significantly better results for those clients that participate in it than those advertisers that don't utilize continuous call tracking. And I would argue that the reason for that is, as advertising directors turn over and chief marketing officers turn over, to having a steady stream of fact-based information that continues to go to them is invaluable. All of those call tests that they do in the PAYS database get databased into this thing called PAYS. They've got some 65,000 data points in there, enough for about 50 sales aids that are category specific, so that's great. And they also do a lot of work with all of you. They've participated in some 200 client-specific proposals. They're taking this research, they're taking this call tracking information, and they're helping apply it to selling situations so you can provide the most fact-based information to your clients. They do a great job. And for those of you that are not members of the National Marketing Division, I would really encourage you to check that out. Our systems continue to work really well. There's about $1 billion that flows through our systems annually. And when you look at what's behind that, all of the elite transactions, all of the rates of data transactions, the billing transactions, the graphics transactions, the tear page transactions that we do, it's 5 million transactions that flow through our system. So we're a very, very big piece of the national order infrastructure. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously, and we're certainly not going to take our eye off the ball in that regard. So I promised you a recap of what we focused on and what I think we delivered that created some value for you. Just to recap, very strong public policy and industry advocacy, impactful communications that are really beginning to reframe the discussion about our industry and how people think about us. Right? Strong market research, really good sales support from the National Marketing Division, and a national order infrastructure that continues to work really, really well. So now I'm switching gears. I'm going to switch to the current state of our association. And here is our board that was elected on our board meeting on Saturday. On the left, it's Peter McDonald as our chair, as you know. Norm Haggerty is our vice chair, and Sharon Sweeney, who is our do-it-all person on the board, is our secretary-treasurer. Here's the National Marketing Division Advisory Council. You can see the CMRs and publishers there. They have been elected, and I understand that there's an election this afternoon for the officers of the National Marketing Division. So we'll report out on that on Tuesday in terms of who their officers are. Okay, so now I actually have to get you guys to do some work for me this morning. It's not going to be hard, trust me. But in your registration material, copies of last year's minutes of our annual meeting were provided in your registration material. I'm sure all of you have read that cover to cover. But may I please have a motion to dispense with the reading and approve the minutes? I have a second. All those in favor? All right. Thank you. The minutes are approved. That was fairly painless. Okay. We've got 362 members of the association, 134 publishers, 139 CMRs, and 89 suppliers. Our 2012 budget calls for revenues of $10.9 million and obviously expenses of $10.9 million. We are deficit funding the public affairs campaign, the work with DCI, for 2012. The reason for that is when we started to build our budget, and remember back, we're back in the middle of 2011. We're sort of in crisis mode at that point. It's our contract with DCI calls for us to pay them when we activate them in certain markets. It's very hard to predict, or was hard to predict at the time, how much of them we were going to need. And so very difficult to budget for, and therefore our board agreed to deficit fund the public affairs campaign for 2012. I will tell you it's not an insignificant amount of money, and it's not something that we can continue on an ongoing basis, but it is something that we thought was a prudent way to handle this in 2012. To some extent, because of that spending, we incurred a loss in 2011 of $2.9 million. That wasn't the only reason for the loss. I'll touch on some of the other reasons momentarily. And because of that loss in 2011, our reserve is $9.6 million, $2 million of which is reserved for the National Marketing Division, $7.6 million for the base organization. And again, just to put that in a little bit of context for you, our budget is $10.9 million. So say, round numbers, we're spending $1 million a month. We should have a reserve of about $6 million. So we're starting to get to the point where we're watching this very, very closely. And clearly, if we are going to continue our public affairs work into 2013, we're going to need a way to pay for that out of our normal revenue structure and due structure. So I mentioned we incurred a loss in 2011. Part of the reason for that was the spending that we incurred for the public affairs campaign. We're starting to see some other trends that are concerning, however, such as, our membership has declined in recent years. When I started 8 years ago, I think the high water mark since I've been here was in the mid-400s. We're at 362 now. Our conference attendance has come down from recent years. We're starting to see some softening in the usage of the elite system. There's fewer directories in the rates and data system. And those are all revenues for us, right? So an elite transaction generates a revenue. Listing directories and rates and data generates a revenue for us. So, in the last 12 to 18 months, we've started to see some softening there, and that's impacting our revenues. And so we've incurred losses for those reasons and for legal and regulatory issues as well. We've incurred losses over the last 2 years. We also face some uncertainty in terms of our public policy spending, depending on the activity that we're going to see. So, as you would expect, I think, we've done most of the things that you would expect us to do. We've, all the things from an HR perspective, we've trimmed some programs. We have tried to diversify into some more digitally oriented products and services. Most of the stuff we do today on the elite system and whatnot is print-based. So we've tried to diversify into some more digitally oriented products and services, and they haven't worked. And there's probably a variety of reasons for that. But when you peel it back, in my opinion, the difficulty that we face today, and Chris Cummings always teases me that my job is herding cats. That's what I do. I'm herding cats. Consensus building is the hardest part of my job, and it always has been. But consensus building now, at a time when everybody's models are in flux and their businesses are in flux, is just more challenging than it's ever been. So that's just a reality that we're going to have to deal with. So back in February, we had a board meeting. The board thought it was appropriate for us to embark on a strategic planning process to figure out, how we sort of get our arms around all this change that's happening, and to better chart the course for our future. So we hired Kathy Geiger-Schwab to help us sort of figure that out. Kathy talked to board members and other members of the association. She talked to members that were coveting association experts. There was a lot of extensive work that we did to try to get a handle on how we can better serve all of you into the future. And so here's what we learned. Here's some of the feedback that we've got. Really, really strong print support. Doing a great job there. Peter mentioned that a little bit earlier in his remarks. The services that we provide through the elite system and rates and data, absolutely invaluable. There's a ton of commerce that's flowing through these systems right now. That's gotta stay. The work that we're doing on public policy, absolutely mission critical. Gotta stay. But here's some other areas of opportunity that we can look at. We can look at looking at our research. And the business is changing so much. It's a time for us to take a fresh look at the research that we do, and perhaps have that research address some other of the media services that all of you are selling today. We should always be taking a fresh look at our research, so this is probably long overdue anyways. Analytics. We've got a lot of this today. Dennis Fromholzer does a lot of this for us. We get some of this through the PAYS database that tends to be call tracking tests for print programs, increasingly call tracking tests for IYP programs. But there's a lot more to the market today, right? There's clicks and visits and different ways to demonstrate value. There's more complex media plans, and we think there might be a way to database a broader array of tests to help better understand how we're performing across the market for small businesses. Need to do a lot more with mobile, no doubt about it. Peter mentioned that in his remarks. I think I saw a stat from someone that indicated that over 80% of online revenue is going to come through mobile devices by 2016. So we've got to get in front of that better. Most trade associations do a lot of work in terms of best practices. There's an opportunity there for us. Accreditation, we do this today, right? We certify CMRs. But now with all these local sales forces that are coming into the market, is there a way to have some, much like what Google does when they do their reseller certifications, is there a way to look at that a little closer and maybe help differentiate some of you that are in the market and have been in the market and really doing a great job? And then lastly, partnership. We don't necessarily have to do all of this by ourselves. In some cases, there's other organizations, other media associations, that are a little further along on digital and mobile than we are. We don't necessarily have to do all of this work ourselves. So it may make sense at some point for us to form a partnership with another media association to get some of that equity. So those were some of the opportunities that we heard. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to accomplish for all of you is the following. Better SMB intelligence, whether it's through research or through the metrics that we're collecting from any of you. We think there's an opportunity to lower your costs. We think there's an opportunity for better networking and educational opportunities, and really just to create some better value for you. So I've got a lot, quite frankly, on my plate. Peter mentioned the 4-hour meeting on Saturday. Well, most of those action items, guess where they are. So there's a lot of work that we have to do, but we do think there's opportunities to really serve you better into the future. I can't do this by myself. I would very much welcome your thoughts on this. Here's my contact information. If you've got ideas for me, if you think that there's some things that we can do differently or better, if you've got ideas that you think we should be focusing on, I would really, really like to hear from you. So please contact me directly. So that is my story this morning. I thank you very much for your attention. I can tell everybody was listening very intently. I thank you very much for attending the conference. And I thank you very much for the support that you give us, not only this year, but of course for years in the past. So we're working very hard to help you all be successful, and it is a genuine pleasure to be able to serve you the way we do. So thank you very much.